Hello and welcome to our very first class on the fundamentals of Judaism. I had a teacher, Rabbi Fisher, who was a little bit on the heavy side. One day he goes to the doctor, and much not to his surprise, the doctor informs him that he must go on a diet. And the doctor looks at him and he says, "Are you willing to accept upon yourself a diet in order to lose weight?" And Rabbi Fisher announced, "Yes, doctor, I am ready to do so." The doctor tells him this is the diet. In the morning, you are to eat a cup of yogurt with 2 strawberries. In the afternoon, I want you to eat a half a tuna sandwich with a tomato, and in the evening, 3 ounces of chicken with broccoli. Do you think you can do that, Rabbi Fisher? Rabbi Fisher looks at the doctor and he says, "Doctor, I am committed. I absolutely am going to do so. But I have one question for you, doctor." He says, "Yes. This food that you want me to eat, do I eat it before the meal or after the meal?" So today we are going to be discussing a topic that is a fundamental principle in Jewish life, and within the framework of this topic contains the secret to Jewish survival as well as a proof to the divine origin and nature of the Torah. We can actually prove from here that the Torah is from God. And this topic is keeping kosher. Today, more than every time in our history, there are more people keeping kosher than ever before. Jews and even non-Jews observe kosher. A full 35% of products in the supermarket today are kosher. What does the word kosher actually mean? Well, contrary to popular belief, kosher does not mean blessed by a rabbi. Rather, kosher means proper, which means that it is properly checked and properly adheres to the standards of what keeping kosher means. And today, when you walk into a supermarket, if you want to know if something is kosher, you find a symbol that is a sign that this product is kosher. It can be an OU, it could be an OK, a Kaf K, Star K. There's different, around hundreds, the truth is, but those are from the more popular symbols. For those of you that enjoy trivia, the very first product in America to have a kosher symbol was Heinz vegetarian beans, which are still around till today. This was approximately in the 1930s. The laws of kosher are very complex, they're very numerous, and obviously beyond the scope of a one class. However, I just want to touch upon certain components of kosher that are connected to this week's Torah portion. The Torah portion discusses the different species, animals, fish, and birds that are kosher for the Jewish people to consume. The first of this is the animals. The Torah lists 10 animals that one is permitted to eat, including, from the more popular ones, are cows, oxes, sheep, goat, and deer. The symbol of, the sign, I should say, of a kosher animal is that it has split hooves and it chews its cud. Chewing its cud, one of the symbolisms behind that means that one is reflective. They just don't respond to something, but you chew it over. You reflect upon something. And that is one of the reasons that chewing a cud is a sign of a kosher animal. The Torah also says there are 10 animals with these kosher signs, but there are 4 animals that do not have but one of these signs. One of those 4 is the only animal in the world that does not chew its cud, but it has split hooves. And that animal, the Torah says, is the chazir, is the pig. It is the only animal in the world that has one of the 2 signs of split hooves, but it does not chew its cud. Perhaps one of the reasons that the pig is so considered so nauseating or despised in Jewish tradition is the fact that it sticks out its hooves. It says, look, I'm a kosher animal, pretends to be kosher. The problem is it doesn't chew its cud, but it is not a kosher animal. And here I want to take a moment to point out something remarkable and incredible. The Torah was given 3,332 years ago. Moses, who received the Torah, his entire traveling consisted for the most part of the area which we call today the Middle East. He never went into Israel. He was in Egypt, he was in the desert, he was in parts of Africa, and that's about it. How in the world would anyone other than God be able to 3,332 years ago make a statement that, guess what? There is only one animal in the world that has the species of one of these signs. It's the only one that has split hoofs, but it does not chew its cud. Who can make such a statement? You know, we are right now in the year 2020, and they are still finding animals that they did not know existed. Now granted, most of those animals are very small. They're species of butterflies or birds or frogs. They're not major, huge animals. But the point is, North America was not discovered, South America, Moses certainly didn't travel to any of those countries, Australia, never saw a kangaroo, major parts of Europe, major parts of Asia, and yet the Torah can say with conviction that there is one animal in the world that contains one of these 2 species, split hooves, but does not chew its cud, and that's the pig. How can a book make such a claim over 3,000 years ago? This, my friends, is a tremendous proof to the divine origin of the Torah, that the Torah is none other than the Torah of God. So here we see within this beautiful commandment of kosher, it actually has in it a proof that the Torah is divine. Some other animals and species that we eat or do not eat is, besides the animals, we also have fish. For a fish to be kosher, it needs to have fins and scales. The popular fish that have one of those 2, that have those species, or I say signs, is salmon, trout, tilapia, whitefish, tuna. Those are from the more popular fish that are kosher. From the fish that are not kosher, that do not have fins and scales, is catfish, eel, lobster, and crab. So therefore Jews do not eat any of those popular seafood products. So this is some of the things pertaining to kosher that are discussed in this week's Torah portion. Throughout history, many of the commentaries and many of Jewish scholars have struggled to find the reason behind keeping kosher. Some people suggest, well, it's healthier. It's healthy to keep kosher. And in certain aspects, that's a valid claim. You cannot get mad cow disease from keeping kosher. Many illnesses that come from eating insects that affect your immune system and your brain and different things, Jewish people are forbidden to eat insects. There's other things that are considered healthy about Judaism. Today we have refrigerators and freezers, but in the olden days they did not have that, and Jews salt their meat prior to eating it, and that was considered more healthier. However, despite the fact that there are perhaps healthy benefits, it's very hard to say that the only reason why we keep kosher is only for health, because there's plenty of kosher food that, alas, is not healthy for you, just as there's many non-kosher foods that are not healthy. There's also a concept, you are what you eat. The animals that the Jewish people are permitted to eat are all domesticated. They're not wild animals or predators. But again, that's very hard to define. That would be the only reason for keeping kosher. So one of the answers which is given is actually the secret to Jewish survival. You see, the Jewish people, population-wise, are less than 1/2 of 1% of the world population. Now, wherever you go, you hear about Jews, you read about Jews, you think the Jews are everywhere. And that's true, they are. But in actual numbers, they are extremely small amount of Jewish people population-wise. And to put it into numbers, there are nearly 8 billion people in the world today. The Jewish population is somewhere between 14 to 15 million, which, as we mentioned, is less than 1/2 of 1% of the world population. And how did we survive? So many other nations and movements and religions were basically swallowed up. They don't exist anymore. And this is something that people have wanted to know. How do Jews survive? What is the secret to Jewish survival? Well, one of the secrets is keeping kosher. Because when a person cannot eat and drink the same food as their Gentile neighbors, this puts sort of a barrier between us and them. And this serves as a means of ensuring the survival of the Jewish people. So kosher actually is one of the reasons that the Jewish people have been able to survive throughout the past 3,300 years that the Jewish people have been a nation. Because not being able to drink the same wine, not being able to attend the parties, not being able to partake of the food, automatically makes us separate and different than the rest of the nations. Now, this may cause, at times, anti-Semitism and hatred and other types of things, but in the big picture, what it has caused is that the Jewish people have been able to maintain their distinctness, independence, and been able to survive as a people. It is also a reminder that we are Jews. You know, we spend a lot of our time eating. We take snacks, we eat, we drink. We're constantly, we may eat 3 official meals a day, but throughout the day we eat snacks. There's things that we do want to eat, we want to drink. When a person keeps kosher, they constantly have to be conscious of what I'm able to eat and what I can't eat. And therefore, it helps remind us of who we are as a Jew. I want to share with you, in conclusion, a very powerful story regarding keeping kosher. In the 1950s and 60s. Israel was not what it is today. It was a third world country, many, many, many years behind America, and living conditions were not very good, especially for immigrants. And there was a Russian immigrant that had recently come from this former Soviet Union in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and wanted to secure housing for herself and her children. Her husband was no longer alive. And every day she would go to the immigration office, and one day somebody wasn't there, one day that they were busy, one day a different excuse, they're backlogged, and every day she's schlepping along, and can you imagine the suffering that she had to endure? One day a new woman was behind the desk, and she goes up to her and she says, "What could I do for you?" She says, "I'm so-and-so, and I am looking for a home for my children and myself." The woman behind the desk says, "Can I see your passport, please?" And she looks at the passport intently, and he says, "Your name is," I believe it was Rappaport. He says, "Your husband was so-and-so?" She says, "Yes." "And you're the wife?" He says, "Yes." He says, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." He says, "What are you talking about?" She says, "My father would speak lovingly about your family." She says, "Really?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Your husband," she tells him, "your husband, Chaim Rappaport, he was in the hospital with an illness." She says, "Yes." "Well, your husband refused to eat the food in the hospital because it wasn't kosher. And you, Mrs. Rappaport, would bring him food every single day." She says, "Yes, yes." He says, "Well, my father was next door, right nearby. And your husband would take the little food that he had and he would share it with my father because he wanted that not only he should keep kosher, but also my father should keep kosher." And my father spoke about this experience with such affection and such admiration, to what extent a Jewish person would go in the most challenging of time in the Soviet Union, where there was barely any food, to make sure to keep kosher. And she says, "I'm going to make sure now that you get an apartment." And indeed, she was given a very beautiful and spacious apartment, both for her and her children. So this is a little bit of an overview, a very brief one, on the significance of kashrus, of keeping kosher. And I hope that through learning about this, it will inspire us, perhaps in our life, to make a conscientious effort to increase in this special mitzvah. And I don't mean that overnight, that means we're going to start immediately keeping everything of kosher. But even if it's a little bit, you take baby steps. If perhaps one is accustomed to eating meats that are not kosher, so one resolves, going forward, I will not do so. Or perhaps one will be careful about what type of restaurants they frequent, or not to mix milk and meat. We do not, if you had a burger, you don't wash it down with a cup of milk, and things like that. Every little step in the direction of keeping kosher is a step in the good direction. This is a very, very precious and special mitzvah that was given only to the Jewish people, and we should appreciate it. Take care and have a wonderful day.